Hi. I hope that after reading the professional documents that you have a better understanding of what Joseph Harris was trying to accomplish with his book. Now, I know that you don't fully understand what the exact Harris moves are yet, but that's what I'd like to take a moment and explain with you. And then, after this video, you'll continue on by practicing some of these moves and some of the activities that we use in our classrooms yourself. To reiterate, the whole purpose of the Harris moves are to teach students how to be more strategic and more purposeful with the evidence that they choose to put in their writing. We want to help them answer these questions. Why do we need evidence? How do I pick the right evidence? How much evidence is enough? And what do I do with the evidence? If you teach your students about the Harris moves and some of the ideas from his book, you can begin to help them understand that when they pick evidence, it's not just about plopping it into their writing. It's about choosing evidence strategically, using evidence in their own writing to strengthen their own ideas, not to cover them up. And we always want to remind students that they're in conversation with those other texts that they researched to get to the point where they were writing their own ideas. That they are part of the argument. And so what you should have seen in the professional reading is that Harris divides the moves into two main categories: forwarding and countering. I like this quotation. He says, in forwarding a text, you extend its uses. In countering a text, you note its limits. So basically, when we teach our students to use source material, we can teach them to forward a text. That means they take ideas or words from a text and use them to support or highlight their own ideas. In contrast to that, we have countering. This is something that our students don't normally do without some guidance. If we can teach our students to counter, what they then do is push back against some of their source material, the stuff that maybe they don't quite agree with, or the stuff they read that they see, well, I understand what they're saying, but I think that there's some limitations to what they're saying. They're not just in their own writing saying this is wrong. What they do when they counter is that they point out the limitations of certain source material and offer alternatives, thus strengthening their own claims. I really liked this that Joseph Harris said in his book. He said that forwarding is like saying yes and countering is like saying yes, but. That really helped me understand the differences between the two. Now, since we teach secondary students, we separate forwarding into all the moves that are described in rewriting: illustrating, authorizing, and extending. Illustrating is probably something your students are doing already. That's when students use evidence to support their idea. Basically, anytime you have your students writing and they find a quotation or they paraphrase material so that they can say, yes, this supports my claim. Look, this agrees. They're illustrating. Authorizing is really interesting. That's when you use the credibility of a source to strengthen your idea. For example, if you're writing an argument about school start times, you find some evidence that supports your claim. One piece of evidence comes from a blogger mom. Another piece of evidence comes from a child's pediatrician. Well, if you really want to use the evidence that provides more authority, you might choose the doctor and what he had to say to put in your writing, because that does lend a certain credibility to your own writing, right? It gives it authority. That's all authorizing is. And then finally, Joseph Harris describes extending. That's using the ideas that others have, but putting a new spin on it for your own purposes. All three of these moves that I've just described, you're going to practice a little later on. So if you don't fully get it, it's okay. Trust me. When we teach our students to counter, he does describe specific moves in his book, but for the purpose of our work, we consider countering as all one thing. I do want to point out, though, countering is not about picking a fight. Joseph Harris is very clear. An argument isn't about saying who wins, but we're all about furthering a conversation. If you're pushing back on source material, it's so that you can further your own claim, so that you can take the conversation in a certain direction. It's not about winning an argument. But when we counter, some things we can do. We can note the limits of other writers' ideas. We can offer alternatives to what they say. Both of these things are great ways to push a conversation forward, to strengthen your own claim, all while pushing back against what someone else has already said. Now, like I said, both with forwarding and countering, if you're like, I don't think I really understand the moves yet, and even if I did, I don't know yet how I can use them in my classroom, it's okay. As you continue on, we're going to be practicing identifying some of these moves and showing you ways that you can use these moves in your classroom. So no worries, there's still lots left to learn.